Guess which lawsuit? The Twitter files may be very helpful. What's your guess? The Missouri versus Biden lawsuit, in which the plaintiffs, 2 state attorney generals, several doctors, and individual plaintiffs allege that the government was involved in a censorship enterprise in which they colluded with or coerced social media platforms to suppress certain information. And one of those allegations relates to suppression of information regarding Hunter Biden's laptop. So in this video, we're going to take a quick look at the complaint, the specific allegations regarding the Hunter Biden laptop, and we're also going to look at what is it that the plaintiffs want? What's the remedy? So, hi there, I'm Michelle Hagan. I'm a legal analyst and a former prosecutor. I did a video on the judge, a federal judge, ordering 10 government officials to submit to a deposition, which included Anthony Fauci, Jen Psaski, several people from the White House, FBI agents, Surgeon General of the United States, etc. Please look at the video I did on, it's called Fauci, Psaski were ordered depositions. Take a look at that video to catch up. But don't worry, I'll do a quick overview of what we're talking about. So I'm also going to show you some of the emails regarding that the plaintiffs have submitted regarding alleged proof of the censorship, the coordination, the alleged collaboration, coordination, collusion, coercion between government officials and social media platforms. So let's go. Let me give you a little background. So this lawsuit is filed by the Attorney General of Missouri, the Attorney General of Louisiana, and several plaintiffs. I'll show you that. And it's alleging that several subjects, content, speakers, viewpoints were suppressed around the Hunter Biden laptop, around the origins of the virus, around the mask mandates. Also, they allege integrity. They also allege that there was impact regarding the integrity of voting by mail. And why that's important, specifically regarding the Hunter Biden laptop, as alleged by the plaintiffs, is they're saying because the information was suppressed 3 weeks before the election, it may have impacted the election. Now, this is not a political video. Well, I'm not talking politics here. I'm talking law, and I'm talking the Constitution, specifically the First Amendment of the Constitution. So let's go ahead and take a look at, and before I do that, this video is simply my opinion. It's for education information. I want to know what your opinion is. I want you to leave, if you're interested, you can leave a question or a comment. Please do subscribe. Please support my work by subscribing. Thank you to all of those of you who have subscribed. I appreciate your support of Michelle's analysis. Okay, so let me show you. I don't even know if you guys know about this lawsuit. If you haven't seen my video, you may not know about it. So let's take a look at it. It's 164 pages long, so I'm only going to show you part of it. So this was filed in the U.S. District Court, so federal court, on October 6th. It's 164 pages. We're just going to look at 19, okay? Just going to do you a brief overview here. We're going to get to the specific allegations of the regarding Hunter Biden's laptop, whether or not stories were suppressed. So, and whether or not these Twitter files are going to be helpful to these plaintiffs. And I think they will be, or they could be. So let's see. All right. State of Missouri and the state of Louisiana, the attorney generals, Eric Schmidt and Jeff Landry, along with 3 doctors here. Bhattacharya is, I believe, a doctor at Stanford. Aaron Carrady, and I apologize if I'm saying his name wrong. Carrerity is a doctor also from UC Irvine, and Martin Kulldorff is also a doctor from Harvard. And they're the plaintiffs because in this case, they allege that they were either deplatformed, their information was censored on social media platforms, demonetized, etc. Okay, they are suing, and here's where the 13 government agencies, and if I counted it correctly, 68 government officials. Joe Biden in his official capacity, the White House press secretary, Jen Psaki is also being deposed, who was the former White House press secretary, the Surgeon General of the United States, the head of the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the NIAID, Centers, the CDC, Carol Crawford in her official capacity. And I note, they're all being sued in their official capacity, not in their individual or personal capacity. It's regarding their employment, their official capacity. The US Census Bureau, an official senior advisor from the communication from the Census Bureau, the Department of Commerce, the Secretary, Department of Homeland Security, the Undersecretary of Strategy, Policy, and Plans with the Department of Homeland Security, the Senior Counselor for the National Security Office of Secretary for the Department of Homeland Security, the Director of Cyber Security and Infrastructure Security Agency. I didn't even know about that agency. Gina McCarty, who's the White House National Climate Advisor. What does she have to do with this? But we'll see. The director of the so-called Disinformation Governance Board within the Department of Homeland Security, yet another agency I'm not that familiar with. Andrew Slavitt, senior White House senior COVID advisor. Rob Flaherty, who was the Deputy Assistant of the President of Digital Strategy. You can go ahead and read these. It goes on and on and on, on and on and on and on. Look at all of these individuals and departments. Okay, goes on and on and on. Food and Drug Administration, the Department of State, the Department of Treasury, the U.S. Election Assistance. So what is this lawsuit about, and how are the Twitter files going to be a part of it? You know, if Elon Musk is releasing all these Twitter emails, and I think it's already been reported that the Twitter was struggling with how to deal with the information on their platforms, the content, the videos, the speakers, the viewpoints that were coming out talking about what was on Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, all that took place 3 weeks before the election, and whether or not it impacted the election, the plaintiffs alleged that it did. Okay, so just to give you a little background on the First Amendment here, which is that according to the plaintiffs, right now, free speech in the United States now faces one of the greatest assaults by federal government officials in the nation's history. They're alleging all those government officials and all those agencies were involved in either colluding or coercing social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, Meta, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc., were allegedly involved in suppressing protected free speech. Under paragraph 2, a private entity violates a private entity, which would be Facebook, Twitter, you know, my YouTube page, right? I'm also a private entity. But if I am coerced or induced by the government to censor free speech, that's a violation of the First Amendment. So private businesses, private entities cannot collude or be coerced with the government because they basically become an arm of the government, and the government is not allowed to suppress free speech. So therefore, private entities acting on behalf or collusion with the government would also be in violation of the First Amendment. That's what the plaintiffs are alleging. The government cannot accomplish through threats of adverse government action what the Constitution prohibits it from doing directly. Okay, they cannot accomplish through threats. So were they threatening the social media companies? And by the way, if you look at the name of all the defendants, no social media representative, employee, or individual is named as a defendant. This lawsuit is against the plaintiffs versus the governmental officials and entities, okay? And they're alleging that's exactly what has occurred over the last several years, where implied threats by government officials in the Biden administration's open and explicit censorship programs to suppress disfavored speakers, viewpoints, and content on social media platforms under the Orwellian guise of halting so-called disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation, which those terms alone should send shivers down your spine, because who determines what's true and what's not, right? What's false information and what's not? Do we allow the government? Because, as the plaintiffs allege in this lawsuit, if the government determines what's truthful and what's favored speech, they're going to censor the rest of it, right? If they don't like what you're saying, can they just deplatform you? Can they silence you? Not according to the First Amendment of our Constitution. That was not the intent of our founding fathers, because they understood what happened, right? There's a reason they left and came to the United States, okay? I won't go into all of that, but also in Section 230, which was hotly debated between the social media companies, because they didn't want to be responsible for all the stuff that was being published across their platforms, whether it was true or not true, right? So they have a protection under Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which pretty much gives them a liability protection, okay? So you can go ahead and read this. I want to get to the Hunter Biden part. There's email correspondence, which I'll show you the emails in a second, between government officials and social media platform representatives. And the plaintiff, again, is alleging that it was an unprecedented rise of censorship and suppression of free speech, which threatened the fundamental right of free speech of all citizens in Missouri, Louisiana, and throughout America. And in particular, these individual plaintiffs who were censored or shadow banned by the governmental actions coercing or colluding the social media platforms. Under the First Amendment, this paragraph 8, the federal government should play no role in policing private speech or picking winners and losers in the marketplace of ideas. Talks about the case involves a massive, sprawling federal censorship enterprise across at least 11 federal agencies, all with the intent and the effect of pressuring social media platforms to censor and suppress private speech that federal officials disfavor. Is it disfavorable to Joe Biden if negative information comes out prior to a campaign? If there's negative information on Hunter Biden's laptop, or anybody's, any of these candidates running for presidency? The censorship enterprise is extremely broad. It goes across, you can look here, all the agencies that I showed you. Okay, so now I want to get into the allegations. Freedom of speech is the bedrock of American liberty. First Amendment says Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. It's an individual right that all American citizens have, is the right of free speech. Now, there are certain restrictions. If it's obscene, if it's defamatory, then the speaker bears the consequences of that. You still have the right to say it, though, even if you disagree with someone's opinion, even if you don't like the other, right? You still have the right in the United States. And also in the Missouri Constitution, every person shall be free to say, write, or publish, or otherwise communicate whatever he will on any subject, being responsible for all the abuses of that liberty. No law shall curtail or restrain freedom of speech or the press. The press is also covered in this. So the press has a right of free speech too. They have a right to report on any story. Okay? The rights are fundamental and must be protected against government interference. So, did the government officials, government agencies, did they interfere with the coverage or the reporting or the posting of videos or the information on social media platforms regarding Hunter Biden's laptop? What was on it? Who knows? Okay. There's many reports out there about what was on it, and allegations involving influence peddling with Ukraine government, with other governments that were allegedly being reported that were on the laptop. You'll have to check out all this information for yourself. I'm just telling you what's in this lawsuit. So they're saying the government officials have the lack of authority. Okay, so and they can't go around the First Amendment by calling it misinformation, right? The government's not supposed to be policing free speech. You can go ahead and read through all this. Okay, and they're arguing that the social media platforms are the public square now. 66% of the US adults use Facebook, 72% use YouTube, 23% use Twitter, 41% uses Instagram. So you can see the dominance of the social media platforms to control or have the opportunity to control speech. And speech includes also, First Amendment also includes your right to receive information, not only to speak it, to receive information, differing viewpoints, differing speakers, different content. That's all protected by the First Amendment. Okay, so here's the Hunter Biden laptop story. Public and private attempts to police misinformation or disinformation on social media have proven embarrassingly inaccurate. That's why, one of the reasons why we have the wisdom to have the First Amendment. Yesterday's misinformation often becomes today's viable theory and tomorrow's established fact. Even where there is a wide scholarly consensus concerning a particular matter, the truth is served by allowing that consensus to be challenged without fear of reprisal. Today's accepted wisdom sometimes turns out to be mistaken, and that's relating to a Supreme Court case, the Alvarez case. This prediction has proven true again and again when it comes to suppressing misinformation and disinformation on social media. So what's that saying is that there needs to be a wide variety of free flow of information in order to protect and celebrate the First Amendment. Otherwise, it can be argued it's censorship of protected free speech. So here's one of their allegations in this lawsuit. The Hunter Biden laptop story. Now, whether all these Twitter files, looks like it's coming out that there was a lot of conversation with Twitter and White House officials and other government officials as to what to do about the Hunter Biden laptop story. We'll have to see how the evidence rolls out. Whether or not that's proven is a whole nother story. But here's what they allege. And just because it's an allegation doesn't mean it's true. So they say here, perhaps most notoriously, social media platforms aggressively censored. Now, any kind of censorship is not right, but aggressively censored in October 14, 2020, New York Post expose about the contents on the laptop, Hunter Biden's laptop, then candidate Biden's son, who was running for president. So this was 3 weeks, I think, before the election that this New York Post expose came out. What happened? Both Twitter and Facebook, they allege, took extraordinary censorship measures against the Post. They locked the Twitter account of the New York Post. They said that the laptop information broke the social networks rules against distribution of hacked material when there were zero claims that Hunter Biden's computer was hacked. That's what the New York Post and the New York Post article and the plaintiffs allege here. They also, Twitter and Facebook blocked users from sharing the link of the New York Post article, indicating that Hunter Biden introduced Joe Biden to Ukrainian businessmen. They called the link potentially harmful. A Wall Street Journal editorial board reported that, quote, nearly all of the media at the time ignored the story or fact-checked it as false. They didn't fact-check it. There wasn't any investigative reporters out there asking questions. Neither Hunter Biden nor the Biden campaign denied that the laptop was Hunter. Hunter's business partner, Tony Bobulinski, went public with documents backing up some of the laptop's contents, but where was that in the media? It's showing up in 2022, but where was it at the time? That's what they're alleging here. And they're saying that Biden and his allies attacked the Hunter Biden laptop. They called it disinformation. 50, quote, intelligence officials, this is paragraph 135, circulated a statement peddling that it was the Russian disinformation line. That's what they kept saying. That's what we kept hearing on the news. It was all Russian disinformation, this whole alleged Hunter Biden laptop. That whole story was all Russian misinformation. Well, they're saying here that plaintiffs are saying, no, that was a lie. Why were they censoring these stories? Paragraph 136, in early 2022, over a year and a half later, major news organizations are finally admitting that the Hunter Biden laptop story was truthful. And that's probably why Elon Musk, now that he owns Twitter, maybe he's looking at these Twitter emails, these Twitter files of all these emails that are probably going to keep coming out and may be very helpful or not to these plaintiffs. They talk about many social media giants banned any link to the story. And Twitter even went so far as to stop its users from sharing the story one-on-one through direct messaging. So what is a private entity doing like Twitter? Banning, censoring, removing, not allowing people to link onto a news media story. Aren't we the ones to determine whether or not it's true or not? You know, couldn't that be argued to be a suppression of free speech to let all the information out there? You know, the solution to false statements out there, to BS stories out there, is not less speech, it's more speech. The more information that comes out there, the more opportunity we have to engage in critical analysis, to do our own research, to find out what the facts are, to find out who says what, are there any conflicts of interest, who has a motive, what backs up that allegation, etc. Speaking of which, let's take a look at what may be the evidence underlying some of these allegations. Now, these are emails right here that were filed with this lawsuit. And if you look at it, it's the black redactions are not mine. This is how the exhibits appear. The yellow highlights are mine. But right here, it says somebody from fb.com, that's Facebook, to Andrew Slavitt. Who is he? He's an official with the White House. He was in charge of the COVID response. Here's an email between Facebook and the White House. Why are they communicating? Okay, maybe they want to get the information out, you know, where people can go to get help, all of that, where they can get more information. But read this email. It says, we appreciate your feedback on what would be the most helpful to you. So this is Facebook sending this email to several White House officials, the WHO and other FB, Facebook officials. The first update is related to data we can share on a regular basis with the White House and Health and Human Services regarding the vaccine intent. So they're sharing information. What are they gathering from people's accounts? The second is to provide additional context. And they talk about here, we're building on our work across the past several years on misinformation. So for several years, Facebook has been working on this misinformation. Also on election integrity work. What is that? I'm just curious. It may not even be, bad actions, but I'm just curious. And how come people aren't asking questions about this? In our work over the past year to fight COVID, misinformation, and to amplify authoritative information. So doesn't that say that Facebook is saying that we are working with the government to amplify certain speakers and not others? Maybe I'm misreading this. I could be misreading this. Then they have this, we're accelerating progress in a few key areas. So this email is between the White House officials, government officials, and Facebook social media platform, a private entity, and they're working with, are they being colluded with the government? Are they being coerced? So number one, combating vaccine misinformation and de-amplifying content. Right here, they're admitting it. They're de-amplifying content. How do they decide what content to amplify? I guess make visible, and de-amplify, make difficult to get a hold of those postings, content? I don't know. Promoting the vaccine and providing authoritative information. We will use our scale and product to increase people's intent to get vaccinated by showing people authoritative information from the CDC. Well, but hasn't the CDC changed their policy on all of this? Their guidance? This is where, this is why we have to be very careful around the government in working with other private entities, or private entities working with the government to allegedly suppress free speech. Talking about countering misinformation and increasing education and awareness and trust. That's great. Increase education, awareness, and trust. Post where you can go and get the shot. Post what, you can do to increase your immune system. Post all of that information. But what is countering misinformation about? We will use our reach to drive vaccine acceptance. Why do you have to drive acceptance of something that's supposed to be helpful to you? Driving information I get, but I don't know, maybe it's just the wording, maybe I'm misreading this. And personalized ads, blah, 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 increase visibility, that's great, I understand all that, but it's the part where you're suppressing and determining what's misinformation or disinformation. That's the part that gets problematic. That's why we have the First Amendment. Because if government officials, depending on who the king is or who the queen is, they're going to decide what information is going to be allowed to be given to the public? No, that's why we have the First Amendment. Here's an email with Twitter with Robert Flaherty, another White House official, HSS, an official from the Health and Human Services, another Twitter, several other Twitter, regarding a follow-up meeting. Rob, Clark, and Josh, thanks again for the meeting. We are building on our continued efforts to remove. Here it is. Isn't this an admission? They're removing harmful, misleading information. And who decides that? Who decides what's misinformation? We've also introduced a strike system. So here they're telling White House officials, government officials, this is what we're going to do. We're committing to working with stakeholders in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors to address the reliability of information. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, they have a right to have their own so-called content moderation policies. In other words, censorship policies. They have the right to do that, as well as I have the right to censor comments or whatever. I'm a private entity, but when I'm doing it on behalf or in collusion or coercion with the government officials, that's where the First Amendment could be violated. Okay. So there's a whole bunch here. Sharing and updating our work and our progress. You can go ahead and look at this. Here's more Twitter. The Twitter policy team would like to share an update on our work to combat misinformation while also sharing reliable. Well, what's reliable and what's not? I mean, what we knew 2 years ago is different than now. Information needs to be out there so that people can evaluate it, whether or not you agree with it or not. I mean, that's my opinion. Again, this video is simply my opinion. What's your opinion? Leave a comment, leave a question. I want to know what your analysis is. They're updating, additional measures. So this is just some of the emails on detail on content that doesn't violate. They talk about just because it's on our list for removal. So they had a list that they were sharing with government agency, government officials. Hasn't historically meant that it's been removed, but I want to get to the sense of the state of play here. So you can see how they're communicating back and forth. They've announced, this is Facebook, following up on your request for misinformation themes. All of the following violate our updated misinformation policy. So doesn't it look like Facebook is adjusting its policies to be in accord with the government? Why are they doing that? False claims about side effects. Well, what do we know? What are those the same side effects now, or have we learned things? Comparing the vaccine to the flu vaccine, downplaying the severity. Doesn't that show that they were looking at specific areas in which they were going to target and suppress content? The problem is, if they were acting on behalf of the government, coerced or colluded, that's where they're going to have a problem. That's where there could potentially be a violation of the First Amendment. Okay, so I just kind of wanted to go over that with you, and I want to show you now just quickly what is it that the plaintiffs are seeking, the Missouri and the Louisiana Attorney General. What is it that they want? What's the remedy in this lawsuit? So I'm going to scroll down. Here we go. This is their prayer for relief. What is it that they want the federal court, the lawsuit, or the jury, or the judge to make a determination on? They want the judgment entered in their favor, the attorney generals as plaintiffs, the doctors who were censored, deplatformed, demonetized, the individual plaintiffs. I think there was a news media outlet who was also censored, a nonprofit organization that wanted to reopen Louisiana. One of their representatives was also censored on their YouTube or their social media platforms. So they're asking the court to enter judgment in their favor and to grant the following relief. Number one, declare that the defendant, the government officials, and these individual officials in their capacity violated the First Amendment, violated the Missouri, Louisiana, and other state constitutions. Number two, that the defendant's conduct ultravirus and exceeds their statutory, they exceeded their authority as government officials to engage in this conduct with social media platforms. Number three, declare that the defendant's conduct violated the Administrative Procedures Act. In other words, they exceeded their authority. Number four, which is very important, and number five is preliminary. That means do it now. Preliminary and permanently enjoin. That means stop the defendants, their officers, officials, agents, employees, attorneys, and all other persons acting in concert or in participation with them from continuing to engage in unlawful conduct. And to preliminarily and permanently enjoin, I mean stop, defendants, their officers, agents, blah, 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 from taking any steps to demand, urge, pressure, or otherwise induce any social media platform to censor, suppress, deplatform, suspend, shadow ban, deboost, restrict access to content, or take any other adverse action against any speaker, content, or viewpoint expressed on social media, and to grant any other further relief the court deems just and proper. And that's on behalf of the attorney generals from Louisiana, Missouri, the individual doctors, and the individual plaintiffs. So, will those Twitter files be helpful to these plaintiffs? I mean, if there are emails between Twitter, trying to figure out how to deal with their policy, were government officials involved in those emails? Well, I showed you a couple emails where it looks like there's communication between social media representatives. And again, they're not named as defendants. It's the government officials and the government agencies that are named as defendants. So the question is, and what the plaintiffs have to prove, is that these government agencies, government officials, these defendants engaged in unlawful conduct where they coerced and colluded with social media companies to violate the First Amendment to censor, suppress protected free speech. Specifically, for purposes of this video, the Hunter Biden laptop. So, what's your opinion? What's your analysis? What do you think about this lawsuit? What do you think about, if it's true, these allegations that the Hunter Biden laptop stories were being suppressed? I mean, I didn't, I saw all the stuff about the Russian misinformation. I saw all that in the news media. The free speech, there's a reason it's the First Amendment of the Constitution, because if you don't have free speech, you don't have the freedom to look, to be exposed, to receive diverse ideas. Could be false, but it's because of the marketplace of ideas that the truth eventually, will rise to the top, right? But if you're not allowed to look at certain information, if there's censorship, can you engage in critical analysis? That's my question to you. So, thanks for watching. Please hit that like button. Please support my work by subscribing, and thank you to all of those of you who have subscribed to Michelle's Analysis. If you want to contribute to me making these videos, I'll put a PayPal link in the description box below the video. And thank you so much for watching, and do subscribe.